One. Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I had a couple weeks off, but now we're ready to do this again. And today we're going to be talking to somebody who's looked past that transactional type lifestyle and is looking to forge the path for mid-market companies to secure some capital and get some of that strategic growth. So let's get this episode started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, in the world of investment banking and business advisory, where the giants often overlook the real economy's backbone, one man stood out to make a difference. With a decade of Wall Street mastering the ins and outs of investment banking, private equity, and corporate strategy, he saw a glaring gap in the services for middle market businesses. And then in 2016, he founded Hillview Partners, a beacon of hope for businesses seeking to not just advice, but a partner to help them grow and succeed in their journey. Today, we're speaking to a visionary who brings Wall Street expertise to Main Street hearts. And let's welcome to the show the founder and managing partner of Hillview Partners, Mr. Arthur Petropoulos. All right, Arthur, the party can begin, man. Welcome to the program.
I appreciate it. I don't think I've ever had such a triumphant welcoming, and don't know if I will again, but that was wonderful. So it's good to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's jump into this thing. First question I always ask is, everybody who comes on the show is here to promote something. There's something you do for a living, a way you make your money, a business that you're trying to get out there. What is that for you?
Sure thing. So I am the founder, managing partner of Hillview Partners. We help companies sell themselves. We help companies secure capital. Our area of expertise are privately held businesses generating $1 to $10 million in profit, typically owned by families, entrepreneurs, small groups of investors, not usually owned by private equity, not usually venture capital backed. And whenever those companies are looking to either sell or find capital, we like to believe, and I do believe, we are the ideal partner to help facilitate that process.
The economy is changing and there are a lot of companies. I mean, like, I live in California, and as of April 1st, the fast food minimum wage here is $20 an hour. And so a lot of companies who are facing a lot of struggle. And that's just some of the big ones, right? Some of these big franchises. That doesn't always encompass what's going on in some of these little companies where you're trying to survive, trying to build something that will live will withstand the test of time. But you guys are doing something that's kind of unique in the sense that you're helping people find that exit strategy, whether they want to exit or not. You're helping them get in a situation where they can find some of that organization to get some of the money that they're looking for. So let me ask you about getting into this space. What inspired you to transition from being in Wall Street to founding your own partnership here and then focusing on middle market businesses? Why do that? Why step into that realm when you were already comfy on Wall Street?
No, I appreciate that. So I would say I grew up always finding business transactions fascinating. The idea is that basically every industry has been the product of consolidation of particular types of businesses. You see this kind of natural Wild West that ultimately kind of stabilizes into a business, whether it's steel, oil, software, whatever it is, kind of the recurring patterns. And so I found that fascinating growing up. I wanted to get into the world of business transactions. When I did ultimately do so, I think I clearly saw there were different pockets of these types of transactions, some larger than others, and I think some better represented than others. And so when I was in New York for 8 or 9 years, I saw the large-scale businesses were served fairly well from some of the very large investment banks, kind of coming all the way downstream to the Lazards, Houlihan Lokey's, Stifel, Jeffries, and then it kind of dropped off pretty rapidly to where you had representatives that were more business broker-esque, right? And that's not a negative. They certainly have a place and clientele that they address, I think, fairly well, but there's a tremendous amount of companies in our kind of size range of that 1 million to 10 million in profit that are highly sophisticated, have a level of complexity that I believe warrants that Wall Street type of approach, but where they don't have access to it. And so we always found it to be an area of inefficiency. When I was on the side in Wall Street on private equity of buying companies, you oftentimes saw some of these less than excellently represented situations come to the market. And I felt sometimes at the negotiating table, I was trying to give them tips of how best they could position themselves or negotiate things, because to some extent they didn't know how the world worked when it came to the deal. And so when I hit 30 years old and the company I was with was selling itself, it was kind of that fork in the road to say, would you like to continue down that path in kind of the large corporate Wall Street side of things, or do something more entrepreneurial? And I always found I had a good connection with the owners and the operators of these businesses. I'm Greek, and all the stereotypes are true that my grandparents owned pizza places and diners. And so, I saw that type of work ethic and that ethos that I saw in so many other companies. And I said, this would be a really good fit, both from capabilities, both to kind of bring these people access to, I think, the exits and the capital that they deserve, but may otherwise not know how to navigate.
Well, let's kind of clarify that, because I mean, being Greek is a great quality to have, but not necessarily the reason why people hire you, right?
No,
You
course.
mentioned that there's other places that people can go, different opportunities and different pathways to growing their company, but they come to you for a specific reason. There's a reason why they come to Hillview, and so explain that to me. Like, what's the process like when they work with you, and how do you kind of differentiate from those traditional brokers or large investment banks that you kind of mentioned earlier?
Sure. So I would say the standard model for a company that wants to sell itself in our space has always been a $50,000 upfront retainer, someone gathering all of your information and having a mental dentistry exam, and then taking all of that information and puking it to the universe and praying for the phone to ring. It's almost been like selling a house. You hang a shingle and you wait for it. But in these businesses, there's so much more nuance that it needs to be communicated in an effective way to the market. The narrative needs to be constructed deliberately and proactively. It cannot be a reactive or passive process. And so what we say is that the problems of companies selling in this size range and finding capital has always been, it takes too long, it's very distracting, it's not discreet, and the results are mediocre. Really, businesses sell on three prongs. And so historically, they've typically just sold in this space on revenues and EBITDA. Or they say, okay, it makes this much EBITDA, let's apply this multiple, and that's probably what it's worth. So it's always been kind of seen as a return on investment. We've tried to take the approach of much more research-driven, much more proactive-driven, to focus on, yes, the fundamentals matter, but in addition to that, what access does a company have to what industries, to what client bases, to what demographics, and then what capabilities does it have in terms of what about it is special, what is proprietary, what is its secret sauce, what does it do better than everyone? And so if you can define a business on fundamentals, access, and capabilities, and then facilitate that process through a very proactive outreach, well, then you can really characterize a company as the missing puzzle piece to a larger company. You can pivot the conversation from just a return on investment to going to a larger company and saying, hey, you were going to try to build this thing yourself. Now you can buy it. And they're much more willing to pay a lot more for something and on better terms if they see the strategic fit for them. So our goal has always been to craft the narrative, heavily research a more tactical approach, and then really kind of put it on a lockstep conveyor belt from there, from kind of outreach towards offers. And so we call it the value or the offer extraction process, and deliberately so, because this is a proactive thing. It is us getting out there, getting the information to the right people in front of them, making the conversations happen, extracting the interest, evaluating it, getting the offers. But nothing about it is, let's just wait and sit on our hands and see what happens. In this world, there's too many moving parts. Things happen too fast. And if you ultimately do get offers in that exercise, I can guarantee you that if you did the exercise the right way, those offers would be considerably better.
That is a huge differentiation, because, you're right. As a broker, a business broker, you might list all my details and post it on, essentially like a business Zillow and hope somebody calls, right? Which is essentially what happens when you work with a lot of different brokers. But what you're doing is completely different. You're like, look, we're going to look at your company. We're going to go through it with a fine comb. We're going to figure out what tools, assets, what kinds of things you have that are valuable to the market, and then you go find that market for them. Kind of like shaving a puzzle piece so that it fits in an existing puzzle that you didn't even know you were a part of. I think that's a pretty cool approach. Does that mean that when you are looking at companies to work with, they may need some molding and some shaping and some things to put themselves in a position where they become that value add?
There are situations where there's definitely some, call it enhancements or modifications that can be made prior to going to the market. But candidly, if you really think about it, a company that makes $1 million to $10 million a year is not competing on the price of capital. They're not in commodity businesses that need scale, right? So if we're dealing with $2 million profitable businesses, they're not lead smelting plants. They're not, lead mines. They're not these gigantic things that need huge scale, copper mines or rare earth exploration companies. They tend to be B2B, B2C services, products, offerings that have a very proprietary element to them, and it's why they can be profitable and durable, even if they are within this lower middle market. But that being said, I would say, to steal a quote from Marcus Lemonis, it was, businesses are comprised of people, process, and products. And most of the time, if a business has been successful for a long time, it has these things, but what it may lack is the crystallized characterization of all of it. Right? They may have all of the pieces in place, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate it. They don't necessarily know how to paint the picture. So that way, when it gets in front of someone, that person accepts it well. Because the hardest thing in this business oftentimes is getting the attention on the front end. And so think of it this way. If you had a business that makes a software company that makes $3 million a year in profit, and it does something that Oracle or Microsoft wants to do, but cannot do just yet, then if you were to just take that company and kind of dump it in front of them and say, hey, you should buy this, they're going to say, I don't have the mental bandwidth to figure out why, right? This thing's so small versus what we're doing. How does this make sense? And if you dump all of the work on them, you're just not going to get anywhere. So if we can characterize it the optimal way, painting, again, fundamentals, access, capabilities, and then internally within the company, the people, process, products, and then within the processes, origination, fulfillment, operations, right? When you really start isolating all these things, we can hand it to a company, to the corp dev group of a Fortune 500 company, and say, you should buy this, here's why. And we give them effectively the blueprint for the acquisition. And so that way they can kind of run it up the flagpole. And the more brain damage you can save the person receiving what you're trying to sell, the more likely they're going to actually advocate for it. And then once it gets in the system and they want it, well, then the resources get, the Death Star kind of moves in the right direction, right? Like once you get in the focus, that's good, and you're there and you can run it through the process. But the hard part is getting that initial attention, particularly when we are in the lower middle market, oftentimes selling businesses way up the food chain. But that's how we do it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the whole idea is to get that business sold. But you have an extensive background in investment banking and mergers and acquisition, and all that is playing into getting these companies sold, whether it's on the big corporate side where you're showing them exactly like, I didn't know I needed this, but you're showing me why I need it. And that makes a big difference in the presentation, because I'm sure, like Shark Tank, they get pitched all kinds of stuff all the time. There's always companies trying to come up, but you're right. They're just giving them brain dump. Here's my, manila folder of all the information on why you should buy it. Please buy me. Versus what you guys are doing is completely different. You're like, look, I know you've been working on this. This is why this acquisition needs to work. I know you've been working on this. This is why it wants to work. And now all of a sudden you get them kind of excited. The negotiations kind of move forward from there. Can you I know we've talked about it a little bit, but can you explain why it's so important having such a rigorous process, having such a network, having such, well-funded companies that you work with that can acquire these companies in today's market? Why is that process so important? And what feedback are you getting from your clients because of that process?
Sure. Well, look, if you don't have the right thing to tell people, it doesn't matter who you tell. If you don't have the right people to tell the thing, it doesn't matter how good the thing is you have to talk about. And if you don't have the process, you can't take it from point A to point B. So all of these things must work As they say, life breaks you at your weakest link. The same thing's true in business processes. You could be a 10 at 2 things, but if you're a 1 at a third thing, nothing's ever going to pull through. And so you have to have all of these components really locked in to get through the process. And our clients would attest and have been very pleased over time by saying, we didn't think we could get the company in front of these types of people. We didn't think we could get these types of offers. We didn't think we could have a process facilitated in a painless or as much painless as possible for an exercise like this. So that's largely what we focus on all day. But to your point, there's no element of the process that can be deficient because, again, you could have the world's greatest hot dog stand, and if there's no one outside to eat it, it doesn't matter. And so you want the audience and the product and the process.
Let me ask you about your pulse that you have in like the economy that we're in today. Obviously, business still happens. Down economy, sure. Up economy, it doesn't matter. People are buying and selling regardless. But there's also peaks and valleys of when companies are acquiring companies and when they're not. What's your pulse on the market today? What type of company are you really targeted towards, maybe an industry specific? And which ones do you see are kind of the companies that get the most attention today, that bigger companies are kind of looking to acquire?
Sure. So I'd say it's true that you should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. In this economy, the things that have always worked continue to work. It's some of the outliers or ends of the bell curve that have been hit the hardest. And so you can tell from the way my office looks and the ugly tweed jackets I wear that I'm a Buffett, Charlie Munger, Benjamin Graham type guy. And so we've always been value oriented in the companies we work with, in the sense of looking for that durable competitive advantage. Companies that do a thing, make a product that everybody needs, that is wanted, needed, and has pricing power. And by virtue of doing that, I'd say in the 2021 era of a lot of the go-go stuff, people would say, why are you not doing as much blockchain, crypto, NFT, whatever the hot, sexy thing was, right? We've always kind of said, look, we have no opinion on it necessarily because it's out of the strike zone. I don't know anything about it to really opine on its validity, but I just know the stuff we do works, right? The stuff that we do is in the real economy and companies want it. And our thesis when we started this business was that companies would always want the companies that we work with, good times, bad times, or otherwise. So in this economy that we're in now, where maybe the VC stuff's getting a little battered, maybe the hyper mega deals getting a little beat up, we see somewhat of a rotation where it's almost more of an audience for the middle market deals that make money. Because think about it this way. If you are head of corporate development for a large company and your job is to make acquisitions happen every year, nobody gets fired buying a profitable, consistent business, right? They might not put you on the front page of the annual newsletter for the business, but these are things that work. They always work. They have pricing power. They have durability. And so to some extent, there's actually, even if overall deal volume contracts, I would make the argument that deal volume within our area of specialization will actually grow. And so you really have to look at kind of the different layers of the onion of the overall deal economy to see that not all ships, I believe, are reacting the same during this choppy waters.
So what industries do you feel are most exciting or promising investment opportunities that you're taking a look at right now?
It's evolution, not revolution. And so it's not so much new things, it's just enhanced things that always were, right? So if you looked in the business of shipping and you said the documentation and the compliance for shipping has always been written on pieces of paper and handed between people at ports, and now it's becoming automated and software driven, and to an extent, I hate to use AI like the buzzword, but there's automated elements to it that really facilitate it quickly, that take out a lot of these anachronisms from it. And so we've seen the same thing in industrial distribution and manufacturing. And I would say it's neat that software in itself is not really an industry. It's really a part of every industry. And so seeing these newer applications or becoming more efficient elements of older processes, to me, is exciting. And so I would say I don't think of it necessarily as any unique industry that's coming up that we take a particular liking to. It's just very interesting to see the ongoing evolution of almost all industries as we kind of get into a more data-driven, more metric-driven, faster decision-making type of environment.
I agree with you. I think 100 years ago we were going through the Industrial Revolution. Everything was being created. Now 100 years fast forward, and we're like in an efficiency revolution, right? How do we make it better, faster, stronger with less human effort or less time effort? So I think that's a great way to put it. Any company that is doing well grows, and when you grow, there's always pluses and minuses to that, right? Pros and cons to that. Growth is great. Growing a company might not go as efficiently as you want to. Fortunately for you guys have been growing, and as a company, how do you maintain your commitment to excellence while managing the growth and managing the expansion of not only the company, the companies that you're working with, but the teams and associates that you're also working with?
Yeah, sure. So we always see the evolution or the growth of businesses take a few phases. We always say that I know everyone talks about the $1 million idea. We always say all businesses start with a $1 idea. Someone figured out how to make $1 selling a service product or whatever. And then they say, great, I'm just going to do this over and over and over again. But then at a certain amount of time, there's only so many dollars you can make in a day with one person. And so then you say, all right, I'll bring in someone else and they'll make some dollars. And then you have all these people trying to make dollars. And then you say, I have to implement processes. And so the same advice we give clients, we always say we eat our own cooking. And so the same ideas of implementing processes, of getting the right people in place, of having systems, of having multiple ways of measuring progress, of checking progress within our own company, that's really been a key element to our own growth. And we say intelligent growth. I mean, there's ways you can grow a company really fast that's really dumb, and it will ultimately implode backwards. And so we want to be the oldest, not necessarily the biggest, right? Our job is to grow this business, and God willing, we want to build something that's, that hopefully my kids want to keep running here and growing here in time. That's the goal. And we say that to all companies we work with is, even if you ultimately do want to sell your business, it should be built as if it's being built forever, right? Like if you said you're only going to live in your house for 5 years, you're not going to build a house that's going to fall apart in 5 years. Right?
No.
You'd still have the idea that you're building something for a far longer trajectory. So I'd say that's kind of from the internal side. And then from a client-facing side, we started this business because we were maniacally focused on delivering results for clients in ways that they didn't have access to. And every time you do it, it reinforces that it can be done and it can be done well. And then we say, how do we do it better? And so as the time goes on, and you can't see all the gray hairs in the video, we get things done, and it just makes us want to do more. And that's the best part about this business is I think everybody in this world, God puts in you what you're obsessed with. This is what I'm obsessed with. This is what we are obsessed with. And we're not going to deviate from it or do anything different. We're just going to keep doing this just more and better.
Yep. At the end of the day, it's all about exploiting your skills and having fun with it and getting up and doing what you love to do on a daily basis. Even though it is still work, it's doing what you chose to do on a daily basis. All right. Last question I got for you. Looking forward, the future, you kind of talked about it a little bit here. You mentioned how you're building something that's sustainable. Where are you today? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years or so? With the services that you offer? Do you feel like you're expanding? You feel you're going to stay in the same lane? Where do you think you're going?
Yeah. So the goal on our side is to just do more and better. And so we've got 15 people right now. We're operating nationally and internationally, some primarily in the States, Canada, South America, Western Europe, some Middle East. But our goal is to just make this global. We want to be, and our goal is to be, and I will not stop until we are the best and broadest and biggest firm that focuses in the size range that we do on a global basis. Because historically, this business has always been a hyper-regional business where it's been, you've had the firms that do it in just Massachusetts, the firms that do it in just New England, the firms that do it just on the East Coast of the United States. Our goal is to do this on a global basis because as the world evolves, and you know as well as I do, companies can make $1 million a year in profit, but operate globally. They can be getting that money from all different people doing all sorts of stuff. The economy is global, and so must be the service providers. And that's our goal, and that's what we're chewing towards. So more and growing, and I'll have to learn some more languages at some point, but keep getting smart people on the team that can do it better than I can.
That's the way to grow. You can't do it by yourself. It's not a solo sport. All right. So
Exactly.
obviously you shared a lot of great information, but they're going to hire you because you're Greek. So if people want to reach out for you, if we want to reach out and talk to you, have a conversation, get to know a little bit more about what it is that you do, how can they?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully people don't hire us despite we're Greek. But I would say our website, we actually just mentioned before we jumped on here, we just got the domain. So hillview.com, which we've been after for a while. So that's wonderful news. So you can find us on our website, hillview.com. You can type in Hillview Partners or Arthur Petropoulos in YouTube. We've got a channel that we put videos out every 2 weeks. Also on our LinkedIn page that we're putting the same videos out there, and anyone can reach out to us through either the company page or myself. We're always happy to talk to people, always happy to shed ideas and shed insights on what we're seeing every day. And so the more people we can meet and chat with, the better.
Perfect. All right, ladies and gents, one more time, hillview.com, scrolling across the bottom. His social is at Arthur-Petropoulos. And you can find him on LinkedIn. And then, of course, if you want to shoot him an email, arthur@hillviewps.com. Arthur, thank you very much for being on the program today. Ladies and gentlemen, look, growing a business isn't the easiest thing in the world, but like Arthur said, you want to grow it for the long haul. Whether you decide to sell it or not, that's irrelevant. You grow it like you will, and then you have something that you can get acquired, sell, pass on to your kids, but it's a system that works, and Arthur and his team can help you guys get there. Arthur, thank you very much for being on the program today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're
Very much
out.
appreciate it.
Shut up.
It's over. Go home. Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz